Welcome back. We are in the final project of our conference room. I'm super excited. This is where we're going to build some press and hold buttons for our camera presets. Just to define that really quickly, what that means is that we have the cameras in the room and we want to be able to establish some various presets where they're aimed maybe at a chair or they're pulled out wide so they can see the whole room. We want to give our users some buttons. We have the ability to save the snapshot. We've done that before. If you took the fundamentals version of the class, we did this with snapshots. We said, all right, let's save the coordinates field when it's in tight, and then we'll give them a load button. There's various things I don't like about that. First of all, we don't want to just put up save and load buttons onto a UCI because that's a lot of buttons. I don't want to flood the user with too many options. So what we did in the fundamentals class was we created a single button that when you tap it, it will load the preset. And when you press and hold it, it will save the preset. Kind of like you're creating a radio memory in your car, right? I want to come back to the station later, so you press and hold it, and that way next time you tap it, it recalls. That's good functionality. But I don't like doing that with snapshots. I don't like snapshots in general. Snapshots are good for simple things like that, but they really don't scale at all, and they're impossible to copy and paste from one design to another one. You take a snapshot bank and you copy it to another design because you want to duplicate the process that you made, it's not going to even show up in the next one. I would prefer to create logic or blocks or scripting that I can reuse. And that means I don't want to use snapshots. I want to use the block controller. Also worth noting that it's harder to sort of track the chain of custody on snapshots. When something changes in your design and a snapshot did it, you don't really have a way of knowing that the snapshot did that when you're looking at the end result. You'd have to look at the snapshot itself and track forward all of the things that it could be controlling. I like things that are easier to follow, that have a good chain of custody. We're going to do it better, basically, is what I'm saying. We're getting rid of those snapshots, and we're doing it with the block controller. And for this section, we are not going to teach you anything new. You've got all the tools you need already. Everything we're going to be using is something you already have in your toolbox. It's just a matter of creatively applying it. So this is why we saved it for last. You've learned everything. Now can we think our way through a problem and solve it with what you've got already? So what we're going to do is we're going to create a block controller, and let's give ourselves 3 snapshot buttons in this case. You can make more, you can make fewer. I think 3 is a good number right now. In the fundamentals class, we did have the option where we said, hey, there's a couple different ways you could approach this. You could create 6 different buttons and have 3 of them available on the screen when the first camera is selected, and then 3 other ones available when the second camera is selected. Or you could just have 3 buttons total, and based on which camera is selected, that button might do something different. You're basically running an if-else statement within the logic of that button. It says, hey, if camera 1 is selected, I'm going to do this thing. If camera 2 is selected, I'm going to do that thing. And you could go down that route right now, too. You could follow that mentality with a block controller. I'm going to keep it where the buttons are separate for each camera. And the reason I'm going to do that is, once again, the idea of making this applicable to other designs in the future, right? If I built one block controller that really had a lot of logic internal to it that is dependent on which camera is selected, that really only makes that script useful for another design that has 2 cameras and that I'm feeding the output of the camera router to this block controller as well. That seems less likely. I'd rather have something that is more versatile. So I'm just going to make one block controller that has 3 buttons in it, and that way I can duplicate that code for every single camera in any future design without them being independent of each other. Now, you already know how to do the layer part of this, right? So we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. You know that you could go to your design and you could go to the MediaCast router. We already have the output pins for whether or not camera 1 is selected or camera 2 is selected. You could very easily wire that to a block controller to show layer 1 camera presets or show layer 2 camera presets. I'm going to trust that you can do that on your own. We're just going to worry about creating the press and hold functionality. Sound good? All right. So go to this section over here, camera presets. We got a nice huge section for it. We don't need any of that real estate. We're just going to grab one block controller and drop it right here. All of that space was there because in the fundamentals version of the class, we needed lots of room for all the snapshot buttons and all the wires and the logic. We don't need any of it. We just need this one little block. We're going to call it camera presets block underscore controller to keep it wide. And I'm going to have Jeff walk me through this.
Of course. He's going to put me on the spot.
So Jeff, I've given you the scope of work, right?
Yes.
We want 3 buttons that you can press and hold to make various things occur.
Yep.
I'll give you a couple of the ins and outs. We are going to be controlling this field right here of the cameras. Go to your cameras. If you open it up, you'll see that we have a field called coordinates. That is a text field. That's important to note. And actually, let me jump into emulation mode really quickly just so you can see what it does. If I pan to the left, I can see this first number is negative 0.575. The middle number is its tilt, and the last number is its zoom. So it's 3 different numbers separated by spaces, but this is a text field. It's not a number because that wouldn't be a number. Numbers don't have spaces in them, right? So something to keep in mind. That is what we are going to be controlling and what we're going to be saving. That is located in each of your camera control panels. So with that in mind, let's just think it through to begin with. Yep. What kind of controls do we need in our block controller control panel?
Well, they are called press and hold buttons, so I'm going to take buttons for 200, Alex.
That's absolutely right. We definitely need some buttons to start off with. So we'll create a button. Let's make 3 of them. We know we need 3. In this case, I'm going to make them a bank of controls, but realistically, you could make them individually, probably if you wanted to. That's not going to really matter for the block controller class. For the Lua class, it's a lot slicker, but we'll get there later.
Yeah. Yep.
Let's name these, what are we going to call them? Button, press, and hold. How about that? That's pretty obvious what they are. We got 3 of those. Okay, we got our 3 buttons, but what else do we need to communicate with the cameras?
Well, we just said that we're talking to the PTZ coordinate control on the cameras, and you pointed out to me that it was a string. Mm-hmm. So I probably need a string box
Agreed.
To hold things. Now, I think we call string boxes text boxes.
We do indeed. So, and you said a couple things there. We need a string box to talk to the device, but we also need a box to store things, right? We actually want to separate.
Oh, yeah.
Right? We want to separate the things that we're saving from the thing that we're actually sending, right?
Yep.
We don't want those to be the exact same thing.
That's
so
good.
Let's make one bank of string boxes, which we can call, let's make these.
Cam preset storage feels good.
Sure. Cam preset storage.
And they're going to be texts and text boxes.
Text and text box.
Perfect. Okay.
Cam preset storage. I like that. And then we also need the string box that will actually connect to the camera. Because think about it. We're using these 3 to save and remember our presets. Realistically, we could even do this with variables inside the control panel instead, but we're going to expose them and make them controls instead. But we need an actual control that talks to that.
No, actually, we could make them variables, but we still need these cam preset storage boxes because we need that data to be saved in between reboots or pushes or whatever. And so if you push data into a control, that control will remember its state. So if we put a string in a string box, that memory is persistent across reboots, which is why we want to do that.
Good call. Yeah. All right, so let's make our second text box. We'll call this one actual PTZ. This one is what's actually connected to the camera.
Yep. And I'm guessing because this is going to be the thing that we actually connect to the camera, and we exposed pins on the PTZ or our wonderful NC camera, we probably need to do the same thing because we're going to do the old cross wire thing, except for we're not going to do spaghetti messes. We're going to use flags.
Now, we could have thought about using named components, right? We've talked about named components before. It's a really nice way. Why wouldn't you choose to just go over to your camera and say, hey, what's the name of this camera? The name of this camera is going to be called the code name Cam1. And then you enable its script access, and then you recall this coordinates field by looking at its control via named components. You could do that. It will work fine. But the reason I'm suggesting you don't do that is because that means that when you do copy and paste this code into the next design, the only way to reassociate the camera with the camera in the new design is to open up your block controller. And in that block controller, you would then need to reset the name and pick the correct control from your named components list. If the next person down the line who's doing that is not as familiar with block controller as you are, they might not know how to do that or where to do that. In this case, I would argue that control pins are the better way to go because they're simpler. Because the next engineer can literally just look at that control pin and say, oh, that's got to be connected to the coordinates field of the camera, copy, paste, and I'm done without opening up the code. So that's why I think we do that here. Go to your camera, take a look at its control pins. We want to look in its pan, tilt, zoom branch and expose the coordinates field. That has an input and an output. Now, Jeff mentioned we're not going to do the crisscrossing thing. What he's referring to there is that we not only need to send data into this coordinates field, we need to get data out of it. We want that actual PTZ block that we just made to take its data and send it to the camera. And also, if the camera changes, that should come back and update our actual PTZ. We're creating a loop of control wires so that these two controls are always the same. That means that in our block controller that we just made, that actual PTZ needs control pins for both. And let's name these. You can name these creatively, whatever you want. I'm going to call this one press and hold to Cam1 and Cam1 to press and hold. And I'll color them a little bit just to make it super clear that they are different. I always suggest using colors for your control pins. So press and hold to Camera1 is leaving our block controller and it's going into the camera. And then leaving the camera, we have Camera1 to press and hold going into our pin over here. All right, they've crisscrossed. One feeds to the other one and back again.
On the other hand, I have crossed the streams.
Show us what you did.
Did
you put them around top of each other?
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
That's an option too. It looks like they're hugging when they do that.
It kind of does.
Yeah.
It kind of does.
Okay, so we've got some of our controls so far. That's looking pretty good. This is not so bad, but there's actually a little bit more that we need. So, Jeff, how long do you think we should press that button down for?
72 minutes.
Okay. Now, if Jeff is the designer of this system and he decides it's 72 minutes and then we deploy it into the building, it's possible, and I'm going to say highly possible, that the client will complain. They will probably say, hey, we appreciate that you add this functionality, but I don't like sitting in this room for an hour and 12 minutes just to save a preset. So what if we chose one number and the client wants a different number? I think we should make that number available to them to customize.
Yep.
Because if we embed it inside the code itself, once again, the only way to change it is for someone to go into the code and understand what that code is doing. I want to give instead a button or a knob or something to the user so that they can say, you know what, let's make that a little longer, make it a little shorter, and then we can just tell them, hey, pick whatever you want. So with that in mind, what are we giving them next?
We are going to give them a knob.
A knob. You're correct. So I'm going to add a knob. What kind of knob?
Ooh, okay. Let's look at my options. Knob. dB, nope. I don't think that's going to be right. Hertz, no. Float, no. pan, no. Percent, position, no. So it really kind of comes down to integer and seconds.
Yeah.
And I don't really think it matters necessarily. To me, integer makes the most sense.
I agree with that. I think that integer is an easy thing for them to keep in mind. It's going to be between now 1 and 100 seconds. 100 seconds is also probably way too long.
Yeah.
I'm going to drop that down to like 5 seconds. I don't want them to hurt themselves by by choosing something too high. So now we're customizing how long they have to press the button down for. Okay, this is looking really good, but there's actually one other thing that I want to do. Hey, those buttons that we made.
Yeah.
When I made them, they
Yep.
come in as toggle buttons.
Yep.
Is that the behavior that we want?
Well, I mean, let's think about it. Okay, so it's press and hold. And really, if you think about the way press and hold buttons work, it is you want to know when you poke them and when you unpoke them. You
Right.
want to know both of those. And I remember from Control 101 that toggles flip-flop every time I poke them, but momentaries will flip-flop when I poke them and when I unpoke them. I'm going to go with momentary for 300, Alex.
Absolutely. Momentary means that we will be able to have two different things happen. Thing that happens 1 will be when the button is pressed. Thing that happens 2 will be when the button is unpressed. And all our job is going to be is to figure out the amount of time that has occurred between button 1 event and button 2 event. Or as I said, the depress and the release. But the problem with this is that once you've released it, it's off again. Well, how do I have any knowledge that I've loaded preset 1 if the button that I just pressed is off again? Someone walking up to that UCI now has 3 presets to choose from, and they don't even know which one it currently is on. That could be frustrating. So can we give some other kind of feedback to them
Yes.
independent of the button?
Yes, we can pull in those little text boxes that show the coordinates and put them side by side. And when they match, everybody will know that you're in the right spot.
That is close, but I don't want to put those text blocks on the UCI because they're not going to know what that is. So what I want to do is I want to put the match on the UCI.
Yeah.
I do want to compare those two things, but I'm going to hide that from the user and only tell them when it's true.
A Christmas tree light.
A Christmas tree light, also known as an LED. So
Yeah.
give yourself a bank of Christmas tree lights. We're going to call it, these are in the indicator branch. Make 3 of them. You can even call them Christmas tree lights if you want. I'm going to call them preset LED. That way I'm going to use that to indicate when the preset has been pressed. Okay, so I think that's all the controls we're going to need in order to make this work.
Yeah, I think so.
Do you think of anything else we might need, Jeff? Or
No, I think so. I think anything else from here is just extra stuff. This seems to be what we need.
Okay, so we're going to end this video. Why don't you take a couple of minutes and put these buttons and LEDs onto your UCI so that it'll be functional. You know how to do that. You don't need to watch me doing that. And then in the next video, we'll start to write the code.